We'll see if it records now. Okay. We'll see. Okay. So I'm not very good at this, right? Okay, so the x's cancel out, and then what happens? Well, the 5/10 does what? Yeah, it simplifies to 1/2. Okay, so you have a 1 on the top, which you don't really have to write, but it kind of goes with the 1/2. Okay, now let's talk about the excluded values part a minute. So we're going to go over here and just go back way back into elementary school or something. Okay, 3 divided by 0. What is 3 divided by 0? Oh, type it in your calculator and see what it is. Type it in your calculator and let's see. It says error. It says error, right? Okay, because you cannot divide by a 0. So we cannot have a 0 in the bottom of our fraction over here. We cannot have a 0 in the denominator. Okay, if you do 0 divided by 3, you get 0. That's fine. But this is not fine. We cannot have a 0 in the bottom of our fraction. Okay, so you take the bottom, you take the denominator, and you set it up equal to 0. Okay? Divide by 10, divide by 10. X cannot be equal to 0. So we write that as part of our answer. Okay? You set the bottom of your fraction, the denominator, up equal to 0 and solve. So x cannot be equal to 0. Because if that were a 0 there, that's a 10x. 10 times 0 would be 0. And then we would have a 0 in the bottom of our fraction, of our problem, and we can't have that. Okay? And we're going to do some more, so just kind of chill out. Maybe you can ask questions in a minute. Okay, now we had one like this on our notes on Friday. Okay, this is in the wrong order, isn't it? Y'all remember that from Friday? So we need to put it in the right order. So we're going to say negative x plus 3. That's a positive 3. We're going to put it in the right order, but we don't like for the beginning term to be negative, especially if we're going to factor it. Okay, so we're going to divide everybody by a negative 1. That's going to get rid of that negative at the beginning. Whoops. And that will fix that. Okay. Okay, so now we have a negative in the front and then x minus 3. We got that situated. Remember that a little bit from Friday? Okay, so in the denominator, what multiplies to negative 15 that adds to 2? 5 and 3. What kind of a 5 and what kind of a 3? A positive 5 and a negative 3. Now, before we start canceling out, so if you cancel out, then it makes it hard to see. Kind of like I did over here. I canceled out, and then we really couldn't see it very well. We need to decide what can x not be. So x cannot be, this can't be a 0. What would this x have to be for this to be a 0? What? A negative 5. A negative 5 and a positive 5 would be 0. So that would be very harmful to our problem if x were a negative 5, wouldn't it? Because we don't want a 0 down here. So what can x not be here? Yeah, x cannot be equal to 3. That would be harmful. Okay? So now we are going to, I know that kind of covers that up. Sorry. I'll kind of move it in a second. We're going to cancel that out. What do we have in the top of our fraction? Yeah, don't forget that negative 1. Okay? And then we have an x plus 5 on the bottom. Okay? So that's our answer, and this is part of our answer right here. What it can't be. So don't wait till the very end to figure out what it can't be. Right after you factor, you take care of your excluded values. You know, what can it not be? Then you cancel out, okay? Yeah, you can't have a negative 5 there, and you can't have a positive 3 here. Okay, the opposite signs. But when it's like a 10x, or if you had a 12x, x could, on the bottom of the fraction, x couldn't be 0, right? If you had a 6x squared, x couldn't be 0. But if it has a plus or minus sign, you do the opposite signs. Okay, so we're not going to work all of these examples today because I don't think y'all need that. Yes, sir. Yes. next page. Okay, let's work this one real quick. What does this multiply to? What multiplies to negative 6 that adds to a 1? What are the multiples of 6? 2 and 3 or 6 and 1? Who's going to make a 1? The 3 and the 2. It needs to be a positive 1, so who gets the positive? The 3. Okay, in the denominator, what multiplies to 24 that adds to 1? Not to 1, to 11. 8 and 3. Okay, now before we start canceling out, let's figure out what our excluded values are. What can x not be? Negative 8, that's good. And x cannot be? Negative 3, very good. Okay, so who cancels out? The x plus 3's. That leaves us with x minus 2 and x plus 8. Okay? Is this coming back to y'all from Friday? Okay, so we're going to skip number 4. We're not going to do number 4. So let's do let's do number 5. I didn't mean to scroll. Okay, let's do number 5. Because number 5, these involve grouping because there is a number in the front, there's not a GCF. Okay, so looking at the numerator, what multiplies to negative 4 that adds to 3? 3, no, what multiplies to 4? How about a 4 and a 1? So a positive 4 and a negative 1. Okay, so this 2x and this 2 right here, okay, we split those apart, put more distance in between them, and those two numbers that we find, we put them in the middle. Okay, so now we're actually going to do the grouping process. So you group, okay, what will 2x squared and 4x both divide by? 2x. What will negative 1 and negative 2 both divide by? A negative 1. So 2x minus 1 is one of our terms, isn't it? Okay, the other term is going to be what we get when we divide these. When we divide 2x squared divided by 2x, what do we get? We get an x and we get a 2. Okay, so we can just leave that right there, I guess. Okay, so that's the top one we grouped. I kind of took a couple of shortcuts this time. I didn't really do the whole process. I know that these, what I divide by in both groups is going to be one of the terms. And then when I divide it, I get the other term. Yes? Where did I get the x plus what? This one. Well, when I divide them. When I divide this, I get an x and I get a positive 2. When I divide 2x squared divided by 2x, I get an x. And I divide 4x divided by 2x, I get a 2. Okay? Like, the old way would have been to show more work. I would have had 2x here, and then x plus 2. And then I would have had negative 1 here, and x plus 2. This is one of my terms, and this x plus 2 is another one of my terms. Okay, so now let's do the grouping for this bottom in the denominator. X squared minus 7x plus 3. What multiplies to 6 that adds to negative 7? What do we get? 2x squared and 3 goes on the end. What goes in the middle? What meets that criteria? What multiplies to 6 that adds to negative 7?
No.
6 and 1. What kind of a 6 and what kind of a 1? Negative 6 and a negative 1. Okay? Okay, so I group. What will this guy divide by? What will both of these divide by?
2x.
A 2 and an x. What will both of these divide by? Just a negative 1. Remember, if this term right here is negative, your GCF is negative. So one of my terms is 2x minus 1. Okay, when I divide them, okay, I get x, because those cancel out, and I get minus 3, because those cancel out, and I get x minus 3 here. Okay, so on the bottom in the denominator, I get 2x minus 1 and x minus 3. Okay, so we're making progress. Now, let's figure out what we can have to exclude. What can x not be? Right here, what can x not be? A positive 3. Here, you have to set that equal to 0. I think some of you can see the pattern, though, that when you do 2x minus 1 equals 0, okay, you're solving for x. It's x equals 1/2. Okay, so x cannot be, make sure you put your not equal to 1/2. I just always remember it's the opposite sign of this one divided by this one. And because I've done it so many times. Yes. What? Here? This one? Oh, I took these two, 2x minus 1. Okay? Just like here. These two. Okay? X minus 3. When I divide them, I get x minus 3. I divide that. I actually divide it. The old way would have been to say, okay, 2x out here. Now I get x minus 3. Whoops. Minus 1, x minus 3. So 2x minus 1 is one of my factors, and x minus 3 is the other factor. Okay, so now when we cancel these out, we're not quite done. We're going to cancel those out. We're left with x plus 2. We're left with this over x minus 3, and these are our exclusions. Okay? I was trying to show y'all a little bit shorter way to think it through on grouping, so you don't have to do all this work. Okay, we're not going to do number 6, but we are going to do number 7. Maybe if the Promethean board will cooperate. Okay, uh-oh. Okay, so number 7. Look at the top, 6x squared, the numerator, and 18x. What will they both divide by? The biggest thing they'll both divide by is a 6 and an x. So we get a 6 and an x, and when we actually do divide it, we get 6x squared divided by 6x. What's that? An x plus 3. The x's cancel out. Okay, in the denominator, what will 6 and 12 and 18 all divide by? A 6. And they all have an x squared, don't they? Okay, so 6x squared. Okay, so when we do that, we get, when we divide here, what do we get? X squared plus 2x, good, minus 3. Now, this will factor again. What multiplies to negative 3 that adds to 2? Yeah, 3 and 1. There's only one multiple of 3 in there. We just have to figure out the signs, though. Okay, a plus 3 and a minus 1. You can stop and check it if you need to. Okay, so we're going to put this on the bottom in the denominator. And now, stop and figure out your exclusions right now. What can x not be here? No, here. 0. If x is a 0, 0 times 0, 0 squared is 0, and then 0 times 6 is 0. Okay? So x cannot be equal to a 0. X cannot be equal to what? Negative 3, and x cannot be equal to positive 1. That had a lot. Okay, these cancel. What happens to the 6's? They cancel. What happens to the x's? One of them cancels. You have an x over x squared. So you get an x down here that you can't forget about. Do you have anything left over in the numerator? No. So what do we put? Not a 0, but a 1. And what do we have in the denominator? An x and an x minus 1. Okay? And there we go right there. Okay? Okay. So let me come over here and stop this thing.